So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be here. Thank you so much to the event organizers. It's great to see so many lovely faces here. So my name is Tim Nash. I am the Sustainable Economist. I own the domain name sustainableeconomist.com just to confirm that I am the Sustainable Economist. I wear a few different hats, but the one that I'm here wearing tonight is as a financial planner. So I started my social enterprise about 5.5 years ago. My background is that I did economics and philosophy out in Halifax, spent a year doing a master's in sustainability in Sweden, and then came back to Canada ready to take the investment world by storm. I was going to work at a big bank and then slowly work my way up the ladder, embedding sustainability into everything that I did. Unfortunately, I graduated in July of 2008. So I was home for a couple months, had a couple contracts, things were going great, and then the markets crashed. Out of that, I started my company, right? Sometimes the worst event, something you see as very traumatic and negative in your life, ends up being the best thing that ever happened. This was one of those cases. The business that I built is that now I am a financial planner. So I don't want your money. I'm not a broker or a manager. I'm not going to ask you to sign over your life savings. Instead, I teach people how to invest their own money. Online using socially responsible and green investment funds. And what's great about this model is that it allows me to have this conversation around community finance and impact investments. So the theme of my talk tonight is called The Home That Community Bonds Built. Because that's what this is. This building, this beautiful building that you're standing in right now, would not be this beautiful high energy building if not for community finance. So when I came to CSI about 5.5 years ago, we were at one location at 215 Spadina, and there was a waiting list a mile long. It was clear that the model was working. It was clear that there was lots of demand, and in fact, they couldn't find tenants fast enough. And that's when I heard about this seemingly audacious idea at the time to buy a new building. Now, for a nonprofit to go out and buy a significant asset like this beautiful building, you can imagine that takes money. And if there's one thing we know about nonprofits, well, by design, they don't have a lot of money. So they went to the community, and they issued community bonds. And there are a few different series, but at the end of the day, they issued bonds for $10,000 each that paid a 4% annual return on investment over a 5-year term. And that's what they used for the down payment and retrofits of this beautiful building. And so often I get asked this question, what is social enterprise? What is social entrepreneurship? And I've stopped trying to define it. I don't use words anymore. Instead, I just invite people here, right? And I just say, come by 720 Bathurst, right? Come to the coffee pub, we'll have a coffee, I'll give you a tour, right? As they come, I introduce them to the coffee pub model. They see that it's a worker-owned social enterprise, sources things locally, right? Takes into consideration people and the planet in every business decision that they make. I then take them on a tour of this beautiful building. Now, if you haven't been to this building before, after I'm done talking, they're going to do a little tour. I urge you, go and check it out. Because this is one of those things that is best experienced. And as you walk around this building and you realize that every desk and every office is a different type of organization. It's a for-profit, it's a non-profit, it's a co-op, it's artists, it's project managers. These are the people that are actually changing the world. And they all have a home here. And for me, it was instrumental because when I started my company, I had no money. I had no real idea of what I was going to do at that time. All I knew was that I was out to change the world of finance. And here at CSI, not only did they give me the space to be able to do it, and Lord knows it was so much better coming to a building like this rather than having my meetings at Starbucks, right? Working out of my parents' basement. It was so much nicer to be able to come to a physical location. At the same time, it was the community that I think gave me the biggest value. Having someone to high five when I land a new client. Having someone that'll take me out and buy me shots when I lose a big client, right? This is what entrepreneurs need in order to grow. And that's what I found here. It was a remarkable experience. Now, what was great is when they did decide to grow and they did decide to use these community bonds, I had a front row seat. Now, it's tricky for me because I am a planner and because some of my clients end up buying bonds either this bond or bonds similar to this, I can't take any money from CSI. It would be a conflict. So I was sort of able to watch and pay some attention. And really, it's quite amazing to watch the impact of when people make an investment and then see that investment become something real. And it's tangible. I love the work that I do. One of the biggest benefits is that I get to help people decide whether community bonds are suitable for them. So this is what I'm going to do for you tonight. I'm going under the assumption here that you all have lots of money in your savings account, and you're all looking for ways to be able to invest it. And so the next few little thoughts and ideas are basically designed to determine whether community bonds are suitable for you. So I'm going to start by talking about the risks, because like any investment, there are risks. And community finance, things like community bonds, is no exception. And there are some very specific risks. There are three that I'm going to go over very quickly. The first is liquidity risk. The second is duration risk. And the third is default risk. So liquidity risk is the idea that you won't be able to get your money back right away, as soon as you need it. With community bonds, you do lock in for a period of time. In the case of this bond, the CSI or the previous bond, and I think the new bond coming up, we're looking at a duration of 5 years. That means if you're thinking about buying a new home within the next 5 years, right, and you're going to sell all your investments and to buy that home, community bonds are probably not for you. At the same time, if you're thinking about quitting your job and going traveling all around the world and just becoming a vagabond within the next 5 years, community bonds are probably not for you. But if you're investing for the long term, and if you've got a horizon that is longer than 5 years, and you're happy to invest your money and sit and patiently watch it grow, then maybe it's a good idea. The second type of risk I want to talk about is something called duration risk. And duration risk is something not a lot of people know about, but this is the idea that as interest rates go up in the future, and chances are they are going to go up, the original bond was issued at 4% over a 5-year term. Right now, 4% seems amazing, right? If any of you have high interest savings account or your money sitting in cash, you know 4% is a lot higher than you're getting with a lot of other fixed income investments right now. But if interest rates go up over the next 5 years, you're locked in, that 4% won't be as attractive as interest rates rise. So duration risk is something that you need to consider. The final one is something called default risk. And with any bond, there's the risk that the organization goes out of business. Right? Now, obviously, that's a worst-case scenario. I think the business model here is very sound. I've gone through the financials myself, and I feel very confident. But that said, we have to look out for the worst-case scenario. Now, what's great about the CSI community bond is that it's backed by this incredible asset, which in the real estate market is worth a fair bit of money. So the worst-case scenario is that if something did happen and they weren't able to repay the bond, we would be able to sell the building and bondholders would at least get part of their money back. But that is something that you need to be concerned about. So those are the risks. That's sort of the downside, right? The liquidity risk that your money is going to be locked in, the duration risk that interest rates might go up and the return wouldn't be quite as attractive, and the default risk, which is low but does exist. Now, the advantages are fantastic. Because the benefits when it comes to community bonds, well, there's the obvious benefit of the 4% return, right? We all love getting more money, so it's nice getting that 4%. But on top of that, as impact investors, we're concerned with something called a blended return, which is the financial return plus the social return. So we get the 4% financial return plus the social return of knowing that you helped build this building. Right? And as you go through this building, you will experience that social impact. Knowing that social entrepreneurs throughout Toronto now have a home. We don't just have a workspace, we actually have a home where we can come and we can be radical and we can find our supporters and we can collaborate with other members. It's absolutely fantastic, right? Now, at the same time, there's another added benefit. I'm going to get a little bit technical with you. I'm going to introduce you to a concept called systemic risk. And systemic risk was something that was talked about a lot after the crash. I often refer to systemic risk as something called globalization risk, which is the idea that financial markets are so interconnected that now if something happens in one part of the world and there's a collapse or a crash, that now can have an impact all around the world. And that's what we saw when the real estate market in the US crashed in 2008, and like dominoes, other markets started to fall. The problem with systemic risk is that there's really no safe place to put your money. But from my perspective, the only way to protect yourself from globalization risk is by investing locally. Because even in the event of another crash, for another shock in the bond market, social entrepreneurs are going to keep operating. We're going to keep paying our rent. In fact, there might be more need for social enterprise in that situation, in which case CSI's cash flows are going to be just as strong. They're going to be able to keep collecting that rent from members, and they're going to keep paying that boring 4% return on investment. So what I love about community finance is this idea of being able to hedge against systemic risk. Because community bonds are uncorrelated from the rest of the bond markets, you're basically a little bit insulated. Now, I don't want you to go out and put all of your money into community bonds, right? You never want to put all of your eggs in one basket. Instead, I want you to think about it as part of your portfolio, right? As part of your money should be invested in this area. Typically with my clients, we go anywhere from 5% up to the max would be about 15% invested in community finance. But it's pretty powerful, because if you can imagine, if every single one of us here in this room, and if every single one of us here in Toronto or in Ontario or in Canada invested 5 to 15% of their money in community finance, all of a sudden now nonprofit organizations and social enterprise have access to billions of dollars of capital. If every one of us put just 5 to 15% of our money into community bonds, we wouldn't just have this one building, this one home that community bonds built. We would have dozens of these buildings, hundreds of these buildings, all across the country. So it's really quite powerful. So I urge you to come, to check it out, to go for a walk, to explore, to meet new members, understand, experience what social enterprise is all about. In doing so, you'll experience the power of community finance. And I would urge you to consider the impact of your own money. And whether you've got some money now to play with, or whether it's something that'll happen in the future in your lives, consider the impact of how you're investing that money. And if everyone just carved out a little piece of that for impact investments, I'm certain that the world would be a much better place. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming out. This has been a lot of fun. And stick around, and I'll be available. I'll be having a couple drinks here. So thank you very much.